Did your family have any Jewish identity? Did you identify with the Jewish community?
Well, of course, all the friends were mostly Jewish because my grandmother, although she was Russian, and my mother obviously was half Jewish, half Russian, being the widow of Isaac Babel, I mean, immediately brought her into the Jewish environment. But you know what? My grandmother actually it's interesting, she was born in Siberia, but her mother was born in местечко Lubavitchy. That rings the bell, right? So you know what the Lubavitchy is famous for. So my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, in her childhood, for some reason, wasn't friends with the Russian girls. She was friends with the Jewish girls. She was, in this kind of heart of the Schneerson school, is where she was born. So there was obviously very different relationship there towards the Jewish people that my grandmother must have kind of inherited from her mother. And when she read Isaac Babel in her youth, she somehow strongly associated with that. She really felt, before she ever met Babel, she really felt that this author was extraordinary, that, that was some kind of fresh air in literature, and she could relate to it very strongly, although she was born in Siberia and she was Russian. So throughout her life, she befriended everybody that knew Babel, and she, of course, kept friends with all of the people that Babel was friends with throughout the years, and many of them were Jewish. Because even his friends from Red Cavalry were Jewish. Babel was not the only Jew disguising himself as a Russian in the Red Cavalry. Some of his fellow fighters, so to speak, were actually Jews. And then they all found themselves in this key position in the Russian industry, because in those days it wasn't whether or not you were a specialist in this particular field. It was whether or not you were a fighter in the Civil War that kind of promoted you in your career, post-Civil War kind of civil career. So he suddenly found himself very well connected with people at the heads of all of these industrial plants, at the heads of key Soviet organizations. All of them were later on arrested and killed by Stalin. But for a while he was enjoying that life of wonderful connections. He went abroad to his mother and to his sister, or to his first wife, and he would say, "Oh, I will never be arrested. Can you imagine what connections I've got?" Of course, all these connections evaporated very quickly. So my grandmother obviously was friends with a lot of Jewish people who were friends of Babel's, the surviving widows of his friends, writers, that were his colleagues. So I was surrounded by the background. Even the closest family that we were friends with, who resettled from that very same neighborhood where Babel's house was in Nikolay-Vorobinsky to the outskirts of Moscow when Babel's house was demolished, was Jewish family. So of course there was that connection, and they were just neighbors, and we kept being friends with them. So I mean, it was a very much Jewish environment.